Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am running through how I got into history. Contrary to what you may believe, I didn't wake up one day and decide to be a historian. It has been a lifelong journey that started with dragons, castles, and stories I probably took far too seriously. So today we are getting into the nitty-gritty of my life, all the way from childhood through to where I almost didn't get into my honours. I cried in Oxford and then proceeded to top my cohort, and now I am starting my MPhil in 3 months. So honestly, this video is for anyone who has a passion that they want to turn into a lifelong career, and if it doesn't feel sensible yet, I am proof of the contrary. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow along for more, and let's get into it. So, I don't know if you can tell, but I am the child of 2 drama teachers. Now, my brother may be the extroverted one of the pair of us, but I fell in love with the stories. I grew up surrounded by books, myths, and storytelling. I was doing plays for my parents pretty much as soon as I could walk. I was also a child when the media started to really lean into medieval stories such as Brave, Tangled, Princess Bride, How to Train Your Dragon will always hold a special place in my heart. It also probably makes a lot of sense that my dad read Hobbit to me as my first book as a child. Why? I'm not sure, but thanks, Dad. But this matters because I was already being integrated into these medieval worlds. Fantastical though they were, I was starting to understand things like myth and lore, chivalry, fate, honor, even things like women with agency. Seeing Merida ride through a forest, it does something magical to any young girl. So in this stage of my life, history wasn't necessarily facts, it was an atmosphere, it was something I was already naturally leaning towards. And then the family tree came up. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have a family tree, let alone one that is as meticulously well kept as mine. My mum's mother has got our family tree back to, I think it's the 10th century. I wish I was joking. I have a portion of it which she gave me because it shows how we are connected to the English monarchy back in medieval England. So, oh, part of it fell off. This is my family tree. It keeps going. So, let's start from here. I have all of that, and that's just one line, but it shows how we are linked to Anne of York. So I am a descendant of Anne of York, which in turn means I am indirectly connected to Richard III. And obviously you can go back from there and go all the way through. I also have this family tree, which is the St. Ledger family tree. So that's a major portion of my family as well. Back to my absolute monster of a family tree. It's so interesting. So it goes to my grandmother's mother, so my great-grandmother, and it goes all the way through to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 centuries. 15 centuries? 15 generations. So I am 17th generation. That's nuts. I hadn't actually counted that out loud until now. But yes, I have some incredibly interesting people in my family tree. There are some cracking baby names, which I will not be using if and when I have children. I'm not sure how many Ulysses are rocking around in the 21st century. Maybe I should bring it back. There's also a Warham. Warham? This is how it's spelt. Warham. If you're looking for medieval baby names, might I suggest Warham? Anywho, I owe a lot to this family tree because I started just marinating in it. I wanted to know everything because history no longer became kind of this separated thing. I was now able to personally attach myself to it. And I think that's why people are so obsessed with their family trees, because it gives them something to latch onto from the past, from better times or worse times. But having a personal connection to each portion of the world's history, I feel like it's such a personalized and a special thing to have. So to be able to go back to the 15th century and actively trace where my family is from, I don't know, that was very eye-opening. So yes, history was no longer abstract. I started to understand the ideals of inheritance and continuity and family tradition. There were specific names in my family that have been carried through when children were born at sea, when they were born in specific countries. Like, we are able to actually actively track that, though I don't plan to have my child at sea just to give them that name. Needless to say, the family tree kind of changed everything. The past no longer felt like this abstract thing. It felt like a very intimate part of me, and I was able to really connect to it even in childhood. Now, I like to joke that this is the start of my journey as a historian, and it was the first time that I traveled to the UK with my family when I was 11. I will admit it was the most whirlwind, speedy tour of the entire island, and it's quite a small island, but it was for my uncle's wedding in Ireland. So we not only did Ireland, we did Wales, England, and Scotland, all in a matter of weeks. So I was walking through streets that are older than the country that I live in, which as an 11-year-old is just a mind-boggling experience. This is probably when I started to become obsessed with architectural motifs. I loved Gothic Victorian architecture from there, and then I went back through and I found all of these beautiful old churches. And I don't know, when you're marinating in that kind of history, if you live in the UK, I am just incredibly jealous. And this kind of leads into a core memory. I remember standing with my mum in the middle of this trip just going, I will live here one day. And that is still the plan. I still plan to live there. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea what my career was going to be. All I knew is that I wanted to live on that island. The wedding for my uncle was beautiful. My brother got stung by a thistle. My cousin got thrown off a horse. It was an absolutely quintessential Irish wedding. Core memory. I loved it. So I went from a trip when I was 11. I got home and I was like, okay, now what? And so I gradually started to introduce myself to some key figures in English history, because that was kind of where I was attached to at that point. My eyes hadn't opened further afield. So of course, as any young female would, I started with Queen Victoria. Surprise, surprise. There was a TV show called Victoria, which I absolutely binge watched. I loved that show. Even though it is obviously fantasized at times, I feel like it does quite a good job of actually introducing you to some very important Victorian ideals, beliefs, and it looked beautiful. Also introducing you to concepts like empire and the role of women in history, seeing Victoria have to navigate what life was like as a young monarch, as a young female monarch at the age of 18. I feel like her story hit home. And then the Vikings arrived. So obviously I have my mum's family tree, but I also have my dad. My dad is the most Scandinavian German looking man you'll ever meet. I love him dearly. Obviously I did not get the blonde hair, blue eyes. That went to my brother. But I also wanted to understand where my dad came from. And so I started looking into Vikings, because obviously that's the coolest part of Scandinavian Germanic history. Thank you, How to Train Your Dragon, for just sowing that seed early. I vividly remember drawing those dragons like I needed them to breathe. This is when I really started to take on that whole research aspect of history very seriously. It got to a point in middle school and high school where I was reading more about my interest in history than I was about my schoolwork, which I will preface with, I was not the most academically gifted student in school. I was getting high B's in English and history. However, maths and science were not for me. History was exponentially cooler than maths or science. I'm sorry if that's your thing, but I'm a humanities girly through and through. So once researching became fun, the doors were just flung wide open. And then COVID happened. I feel like everyone has a "and then COVID happened" moment. I was in year 12. I got told that you will be doing most of your year 12 year from home. And so I got my puppy and I sat and I did my year 12 year from home, which also gave me the opportunity to start playing Assassin's Creed. Now my brother is an avid gamer and I had kind of see him play a couple of them. I was like, what is this? Teach me your ways. And I fell head over heels. I've played the entirety of Syndicate. I am obsessed with Valhalla, Odyssey, you name it. I've probably started it. I do not have time to finish all of them. I want to start Mirage. It looks phenomenal. Anywho, Assassin's Creed was also another kind of fantastical element into my history education. So I was researching history, I was playing Assassin's Creed, I was stuck at home, which as an introvert, I absolutely adored. My brother as the extrovert, however, that was the worst year of his life, I think. One thing I will admit is that things like Assassin's Creed kind of showed me how much of the popularized version of history has just not been questioned, because I started to want to understand these cultures that they were referencing, such as the Vikings, and realizing that there was a completely different side to them that wasn't shown in this game. And so understanding how simplified history had become for the everyday consumer, eye-opening experience. So after the most bizarre year of my life, I graduated high school and I was like, what now? Because of how terrifying the world was at that point, I got an offer to study history and I got an offer to do secondary education and fine arts music. Spoiler alert, I picked the secondary education and fine arts music. Why? Because I was scared. And my parents were teachers and I knew that it was a safe job. And so I was like, after the most confusing year of my life when nothing seems certain, I do want a stable job. Teacher, music history teacher. Let's go. So I went in to this degree. COVID was still doing its thing. And I realized how much I hated it because the music degree was killing my joy of music. The education degree made me realize that I could not stand children's psychology and that if that was what the entire degree was going to be, I was not having it. So I did a year. My mum said, do a year and see how you feel at the end of it. And I got to, I think it was September. I was like, get me out. So I reapplied. I got into the history degree. I was like, huzzah. But to be honest, that whole year after COVID and doing that degree, that was I like to think of that as a bit of an identity crisis. I got through it, we continue. Within the span of about 4 months, I had changed universities, degrees, I moved to a different city, and that's where I started my undergraduate in history and archaeology. I did jump between majoring in history and archaeology because I didn't know which one I wanted to pursue more. I also, side note, I realized I completely forgot to mention Time Team. I watched Time Team like I needed it to breathe in primary school. I can't believe I forgot that. Tony Robinson, Sir Tony Robinson, I'm so sorry I missed you. But that was wow. That was an influential TV show, which is still running, and I still watch it on YouTube. So, Time Team. Sorry, side ramble, Time Team, phenomenal show. Anywho, I didn't know if I wanted to do history or archaeology, so I was very lucky that I could jump between the two and they would still go towards the same degree. The archaeology ones just ended up forming a minor. So I have a Bachelor of Art with an extended major in history and a minor in archaeology. It's a lot of words. Anywho, it was quite a ride. Moving into college was also quite a ride. That is an educational experience in of itself because I was living with over 200 people my age who were studying a plethora of different things, all from different universities. So they weren't just from UQ, they were from all the other universities in Brisbane. And we pretty much just had absolutely free range. We were free range chickens, and not in the good sense. But about halfway through my undergraduate degree, I kind of had an epiphany moment and I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I want to do. I want my life to be full of this. How do I do this full time? So I kind of went 0 to 100 when it came to pursuing my university studies because I kind of let the college lifestyle really, take away from what I was studying. I mean, I was passing, but I was not excelling, if that makes sense. So for the final 18 months of my degree, it was a matter of discipline, reading. I was all in. I was no longer socializing after hours. I gave my everything, especially in that final year of my undergraduate degree. You could not get in between me and my marks. And I'm so grateful that my final year, my GPA was, I think I'd gone from about a 5 in my second year to a 6.5 out of 7 in my third year. Proof that obsession and effort will give you results and that talent is not everything. So I got my pretty piece of paper. I walked across the stage. I shook the person's hand. I was like, thank you very much. What do I do now? So I applied for honours because I was told if I want to study overseas, I have to have a bachelor with honours. So after my graduation, there was a whole discussion between me and then 2 university faculty members from the history faculty because we found out that I was 2.5 under the required honours GPA. So that was fun. And so I just had to kind of wait. I couldn't do anything. I had to leave it in these 2 professors' very capable hands. And while all of this was happening, I was on the other side of the world. So my mum and I went to the UK for 3.5 weeks as a kind of a celebration of, yay, I'd graduated high school and I couldn't travel after that. And yay, I'd graduated from university and I'd done really well. So I was very fortunate to travel overseas. I went to Scotland and England, didn't do Wales and Ireland this time. I really wanted to kind of stay in the countries that I had done a lot of research in from the age of 11 up until that point. And of course, I'd done all of Scotland. Hogmanay was cancelled, which was just the worst of luck. Apparently, it was the first time in 40 years that Hogmanay had been cancelled, but I still had the most wonderful time up in Scotland. We toured the Highlands, we did all the things. The first piece of sustenance I had in the new year after Hogmanay, which is Scottish New Year's, by the way, the first piece of sustenance that I had was whiskey. set the tone for 2025. What can I say? I then proceeded to do an entire year of sobriety after that, but I digress. I got through Scotland. We got snowed in at York. York is divine. I would love to study in York. Anywho, got snowed in at York, didn't get to Stratford upon Avon in time, so we couldn't see Shakespeare's house. We were crying over that. That 24 hours in of itself could have an entire YouTube video devoted to just breaking down everything that went wrong. Anyway, it was a learning experience. I could buy a new suitcase. We lived. But we got to Stratford upon Avon and I got an email from my university professor pretty much saying, plan 2025 like you are not doing honours. And I broke down. I sobbed. What can I say? I'd given everything in my undergraduate degree to get into honours, and to find out that even though I was 0.25 under the GPA, the university would not give me leniency to get into honours. Even though my academic transcript clearly showed the flick in mentality and how far I was able to push myself to improve my marks, apparently they weren't having it. So he said, leave it with me, continue being overseas, enjoy it as much as you can, and I will get back to you. So I broke down in Stratford upon Avon, and of course that was the day before we went to Oxford. So I sobbed in Oxford. I walked into the Radcliffe camera forecourt and I just broke down. I think it was because I had been dreaming of that moment for so long, of being in the Radcliffe camera and, you know, studying medieval history, and to have just been told that I might not even be able to do honours and then arrive there the next day. It was a very emotional moment. I got to see the colleges where Tolkien went, where C.S. Lewis went. I got to go through All Souls College, which was such a privilege. I got to see the deer at Magdalen College. I found out that it's pronounced Magdalen and not Magdalen, so there's an educational point for you. If you learn nothing, it's Magdalen and not Magdalen College at Oxford and Cambridge. And so I just kind of had to keep going on the trip. We got through Oxford. I went to London. We saw a plethora of stage shows. It was such a joyous experience overall, besides a couple of blips. But that trip with my mum will go down in history as another core memory in the UK. And then I got home and I kind of had to continue grieving and understanding what I would be doing in 2025 if I wasn't going to be doing my honours. And I was doing groceries with my partner when I got an email randomly saying that I'd gotten a spot, and I broke down in front of Woolworths. I think I was in Woolworths. I broke down doing groceries. I pretty much had to go from 0 to 100. I had about 9 days until the degree started, so I had to kick myself into gear. But to be honest, I was so grateful for it. I was so unbelievably motivated since coming back from England and going through that entire grieving process. And so to be able to write my thesis on a 10th century English king, it is kind of unmatched. So to answer my own question as to what I would be doing in 2025, I would be researching and pushing myself further than I have ever pushed myself before. It started out strong, finding out that my supervisor was pregnant. So I was so unbelievably happy for her and simultaneously stressing myself out because she was the only medievalist on faculty. And so I was kind of like, who's going to supervise me when you go to have a child? But shout out to Ian, who was my supervisor for the second semester. He's an early modernist. I love that man dearly. He did so much for me. He learnt so much in order to supervise me, and I owe a lot to him. And to be honest, there were kind of some unexpected benefits from having a pregnant supervisor in my first semester, because I started writing so early to show her the trajectory of where my thesis was going. So I already had 2 chapters done and a 3rd chapter on the way by July, and it was due in November. So I had a full draft well in advance, over a month before it was due, and I could really get into the nuances and the grammar, and I was able to draft that thing like no one had drafted a thesis before. And it was all worth it. I feel like my marks speak for themselves. I was very lucky to receive a phone call from Martin and Ian pretty much letting me know that they'd just come out of the marks meeting after I'd submitted my thesis the month prior. And so when I randomly got the phone call from Ian and Martin saying that I had not only gotten first class honours, but I had also topped my cohort with my thesis, I once again broke down. I feel like whenever anything good happens, my default settings are to just cry. And that was all the information I got until I was down in Melbourne. I was at my first professional medieval history conference, and I knew that marks were coming out that day. It was the first day of the conference, so I'd kind of had to mentally prepare myself for good or bad. I knew I'd done well. I just hadn't gotten any feedback. I didn't know who was marking my thesis. I had nothing. And so an academic who I had been emailing for pretty much a year, he was there. I got to meet him, Matthew Firth, lovely fellow. I got to pretty much tell him my marks as I got them. I got my marks in the middle of his talk and I could not jump, scream, do nothing. I just had to be very poised and professional, even though I just found out that I had gotten one of the highest recorded marks for an honours thesis. Like, it didn't feel real, but I was able to go up to him after his talk and be like, hello, that was wonderful. This is what I got for my thesis. And so the very kind people at Flinders took me out to have a couple of drinks and celebration. That was just the best week of my life. So my waiting hadn't finished because I went out of that medieval conference and I still had to graduate from honours. So I rocked up to my honours graduation still not knowing what I would be doing next. I had applied for my MPhil in September because that's how early you have to apply if you want to have a scholarship. And I would not be doing this thing if I didn't get a scholarship because the fees are eye-watering. And obviously, child of two drama teachers has only ever been able to work part-time. That just wasn't happening. So I walked across the stage, I shook the person's hand, thank you very much, pretty piece of paper, and I was so stressed the entire day. I was told I would be getting the scholarship offers by the end of the week. My graduation was on the Friday. So that was the end of the week and I didn't get a scholarship offer. So I went into the weekend, once again, stressed out of my brains. But on the Monday, I got an email. Once again, I was grocery shopping, but this time I was at Coles. So I have now ticked both Coles and Woolworths off my sobbing whilst grocery shopping list because I got an email letting me know that unfortunately I hadn't gotten a stipend scholarship, but I did have full funding to do my MPhil at UQ starting in April of 2026. My partner was so confused why I was crying like happy tears when I found out I didn't get a stipend scholarship, but he hadn't read the next line. It was such a roller coaster of emotions, but I could not be more grateful or excited to be starting this journey. Plus, a side note is that I will now be able to tutor undergraduate courses. So within 2 years of graduating my undergraduate course, I will now be able to tutor said undergraduate courses, which in of itself is just baffling. I'm very grateful. I'm very excited. My partner joked that some of my students will probably be older than me. And yes, that's probably true, but I'm unbelievably excited to do it. It's such an exciting opportunity and something I'm going to have to get used to. And so you are now completely updated as to where I'm at. If there's anything to be learnt from my journey is that your childhood obsessions are trying to tell you something. Follow those inclinations. It's okay to detour. I had my little identity crisis after COVID. I think we all did. But delays are not completely denying what you are meant to be doing. It's just giving you a chance to grow as a person. And at the end of the day, I'm really grateful that I did it. Yes, I am a little bit behind age-wise, but I'm also so ahead in other areas and I could not be more grateful for that. You also don't need permission to be scholarly. If you are passionate and you are invested in a topic, you can study it whether you're getting a pretty piece of paper for it or not. And I guess the major one is that no path is straight. We don't get to decide where we're going. We can just kind of influence it as much as we can, but we also have to trust that what is meant for us will come for us and what isn't will gladly pass us by, and that something better is on its way. There will always be twists and turns and hiccups, and that is part of being human, and that's what makes it so exciting. Anywho, I hope I make a little bit more sense now and that my journey can teach you something. So after you have liked and subscribed, I would love to know which childhood obsession shaped you as a person. Are you still pursuing it now? Are you doing it as a career? Is it something that's just a hobby for yourself? I would love for you to follow along for my next chapter as you go through yours, and so I will see you next week for my next video. Bye!